Hi, my name is Kyle, and I'm doing some couple of interviews in which we're trying to see the differences in interracial relationships and the dynamics and experiences that these people who have been interviewed have felt and gone through. I want you to know the differences in the dynamics of how being interracial has its effects on the person's mind and the settings and everything around them. Look around you. This is a normal suburban neighborhood, cookie cutter houses. And in this neighborhood, you will find that you will have a lot of interracial dating, and a lot of it. Now, what does it produce? What does it create? What are the experiences of the children who are interracial? Is it bad? Is it good? But whether the experiences are good or bad, how do they view it? You're soon to find out. Hi, everyone. We're back again with a second interview. Could you please tell everyone your name, ma'am?
Wendy Wilson,
And where are you from?
New York,
Oh, okay. What's your family's background?
in reference to.
Like, do you have any cultural background besides being
A
from
native New
descendants of
Yorker,
Africa?
from a descendant of Africa.
No, I mean, what I'm saying is, do you have any, besides being a descendant from Africa, do you have any other cultural backgrounds that you may consist of?
Um, well, my mother was Cuban. My father is Jamaican. My maternal grandmother is Jamaican, and my fraternal grandmother was also Jamaican.
Okay, now this discussion is about the family dynamics of being interracial. Now, earlier that when I spoke to you, um, you told me that part of your family was fair skinned, while another part of your family is dark skinned.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes, that's true.
Now, could you explain, possibly if you know, where the fair skin may have come from or how it came to be?
The fair skin came on from my father's side. Both my grandmother, which is my father's mother, and my father's father, um, all that side of the family was very, very fair. Um, my grandfather and my father, in the early days when they were construction workers, used to pass for Sicilian because if they were black, they couldn't get jobs. So they were that light with curly hair, straightish curly hair, like silky kind of hair, uh, very chinky eyes. They were able to get jobs. They could almost pass for white.
So, why was it so hard for him to get a job as a black man? Or so this means that if they knew he was a black man,
They wouldn't give him a construction job.
even though he was of a light complexion close to them.
No, they didn't care if they were light.
Yeah.
You almost had to be white. So that's why my grandfather said that they used to pass themselves off as Sicilian. When my father would go to work, he would never bring home. Uh, I think one time I remember him bringing home a work buddy, but only to the door. The work buddy dropped him to the door. He wouldn't let. He didn't invite him in because he didn't want them to see that my mother was dark skinned, because they would have assumed that he was also black.
Mm. Would that do you think that would have been troubling for him if
He
they
would have got
found out?
fired.
Really?
Yeah, he passed the Sicilian. That's Italian in the southern part of Italy. So they
Yeah.
passed off as Italians, my grandfather and my father. That's the only way they could get construction jobs.
So I guess that may be somewhat of a positive view. Some people would say, um, but in its entirety, it'd be a negative view because the only means in which you could get something or to obtain something was to be white.
Hmm.
So that wasn't during the Jim Crow era, do you think? No.
Well, I don't know because um, both my mother and father are the same age, 1920. Uh, um, Maybe it was in the 30s or 40s. I'm not sure when it was. I was born 1942. I started to learn of these things later on, maybe in the 50s when we had moved to the Bronx. That's when it had to be in the early 50s because that's when I re- we had moved to the Bronx. My grandmother bought a house, a building, and my mother's mother bought a building, and um, that's when my father was in construction with his dad. So it had to be around the 40s and the 40s and 50s, late 40s,
Mm.
very early 50s.
Was it? Do you think that there was a any other differences? Do you notice whether it's in your family dynamic or outside your family dynamic? Um, the differences in um, relationships in regards to I wouldn't say race because it's one human race, but color.
Oh, yeah. I'm the darkest of
Mm.
6 children. My mother is a dark woman. And um, in the islands, Jamaica or Trinidad, or the dark skins didn't mix with the light skin. I mean, it was well noted. I mean, I grew up knowing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I, when I used to go to my grandparents' house, my father's family, because um, I used to go to a music school, and I used to stay with my grandmother when I would come from school till my dad picked me up. You know, they were very hootsy tootsie. You know what I'm saying? You had a place to sit, and you were never, you never. I was never invited, like, to go to the house. I always felt inferior. I always felt like they were frowning upon me because I was dark. They more accepted my sisters and brothers than they did me.
Because they were of a lighter skin.
Yeah, I'm the firstborn. I'm the first dark skin of my father's children. But my Uncle Richie and sorry, my Uncle Richie and my Aunt Alma, who was married to a very fair skinned man. I think his family was white on one side. They were mixed with very, very, very light. If they had black in them, very, very, very light from down south. And I know my Uncle Frank and those kids, they weren't allowed to play with us until later on when we got to be teenagers. Then they just went off on their own. But most of the time, myself and my sisters, we used to stay by ourselves. We never were very invited to a family affairs or things like that.
Mm. So there was a divide within the divide.
Amen.
we do recognize that sometimes that slave masters would deliberately either rape the slaves or force them to sleep with them to have children
Yeah.
to be able to serve within the home. And that they would teach the children within the home, that the slave children within the home that live there, certain mental tactical means in order to appease and conduct themselves in a way that was pleasing to the master. Do do you see a similarity in division in the way a field slave and a house slave would be treated as compared to a dark skinned person, dark skinned black, to a light skinned black?
Oh, sure. Yeah, because in the slave master had these lighter skinned blacks in their home, and they were treated and groomed a certain way, as you would say. And the field boy was treated like as if they were down. So when you look at the circumference of the black families, and you see the light skinned one, you always know who was the light skinned one. They always got treated better. They were always treated better, even in a black family. Of course, I was very demanding, but it was always my maternal grandmother, my mother's mother, that would cater to me, not my father's mother. But they would worry. They wouldn't mind Leslie, or I call my sister Leslie. She's the second one next to me. She was light skinned. She was born with blonde hair and blue eyes. Oh, they accepted her. But then they were wondering if that was my father's kid because my mother was dark. And all the rest of the babies, they were born like it's almost like they were white. You could see it all coming out as I'm the oldest. And so the same way the the the, the light skinned slave in the house of the master is treated, and the one that's out on the field is treated, we do it to ourselves, into family.
Mm.
In those days, I don't know how they do it now.
Mm. So it's a kind of different. Even in that type of era, was there a high moral family standard that you had to abide by? I
Well,
mean, rules. Certain things that you were supposed to do, weren't supposed to do.
I know that my mother was very strict with us in terms of manners, and we were trained to be very dignified, especially when we went to my grandma Wilson's house. We had to be very dressed a certain way, um, speak a certain way. Our manners, table manners, it was like walking on eggshells if we went to visit that side of the family. But I will tell you, I never met way down the line of the family until my Aunt Alma died. Then you started to see the real light skinned ones coming up and said, "Oh, we didn't know you. What's your name?"
Hmm.
But yet, they never interacted with me. They would interact with my sister Gianna or my brother. And that's today, 21st century.
So a long time you knew of them, but of no premise they would not have knowledge of you. Uh, and this divide you see by skin, by the color of
Skin,
skin.
skin. We all had We all had nice hair. We all had nice hair. We all had beautiful long hair. My mother always kept us looking nice. But there you knew that underlying current of separation, even in black families.
Back again. And as you can see, the first person's experiences were quite dynamic, especially coming from the 1920s on up to the 1960s. Not even being able to experience a family the way she should have. She knowing them, but they did not know her. They were kept from her. These are these effects that I'm talking about when it comes to interracial relationships. Even family members could turn other family members against them, turn their face away from them, as if they don't even exist. Here you hear someone else's experience. His name is Nick. And Nick's going to tell you about all his years as he's growing up and all these experiences, even down to today with his friends. Now, I want to let you know that in this next interview, it's quite a sight to hear the things that you hear because of the way that he experiences his life through a certain lens. So we begin with our second interview, and this is basically to help people to have an understanding what it's like to be in a position that's torn between two positions. Sometimes people will take that perspective as saying, well, it's maybe not being torn in two positions, maybe it's just being intertwined in two positions. So, or directions. So, without further ado, I'm going to let my friend begin. And what's your name? Could you tell the people your name?
My name is Nick.
Okay, and Nick, are you from the Maryland area?
I was born in Canada originally, but yes, so now I live in Bowie.
In Bowie.
Yeah.
So, give us a little background about you and your family history. How, what are your parents like? What are their standards? Break that down to us.
So my dad was born in Michigan, but raised in DC, the DC area, and then my mom is from Canada, New Brunswick, Canada. She's white. My dad is black. My dad's father left him when they were very young. So my dad's whole thing. So you said what my standards and stuff like that. My dad's standard always been to learning responsibility and trying to be. He's always tried to be the most not like his father as he could be.
I can understand. I can relate to that.
Yeah, and with my mom, she was a missionary. Both my parents were missionaries. That's how they met. But
Christian missionaries.
Yeah.
Okay.
They just traveled from reservations, and it wasn't like they had town hall hearings where they yelled about the gospel, but it was more or less they just got to know everybody there and would spread the gospel like that. And they worked at camps, lots of like that.
Okay.
But yeah, so I was raised in a Christian household, being my dad being black, my mom being white, especially in Canada in the middle of nowhere, was not the biggest cool thing for a lot of people. But yeah, my dad's too. There was an island in one of the Carolinas called Purvis Island, that's where originally where we came from.
That's a slave island,
yeah.
Which was separated. As a matter of fact, they were almost giving their freedom. I forget the history of Purvis Island.
But it's not called that anymore, obviously. But yeah, so that's a little more background on my dad's side. But yeah. So when it comes to standards and stuff, it was all scripture, and when it came to just different cultural differences, I think because when my dad's dad left, all he had really was a church. He became a Christian, I think, around in his preteens, and he was raised by older white men of the church. and my mom is white. So I mean, that kind of like he was kind of raised in that same mentality, I guess. Like his dad was absent. There's no other African Americans like in their life, and that's what happened. Like he went to an all-white church. Like there are friends of mine now whose parents knew my dad, and like at the time would not drive him home from church. Like they wouldn't let him in their car and stuff like that. Yeah, there's lots of like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that's a pretty. Did I answer your question?
Yeah,
roundabout.
And so, how did your mother grow up? Did she grow up? Do you know her history and how
She grew up. Radio is evil because the prince, the power of the air, like the devil and stuff like that. I can't remember. It was as strict as like no cards, no dancing, stuff like that. Very strict, like legalistic Christian life. And if I'm overstating how intense it was, like I very much believe that it was really legalistic. But yeah, so I think though, like no African Americans around, that was not a thing. Even so much so that when my dad met my mom, my uncle, my mom's brother, like stared at him the entire time, stared at my dad the entire time, just trying, because he's never seen an African American guy. But yeah, so like definitely very sheltered, very like homeschooled. She did go to some public schools, I know that, but like they lived in Newfoundland. I don't know if you know anything about. Yeah, so like
Finland.
Well, people they'll make fun of you. They'll make fun of you for saying Newfoundland, but Newfoundland is Bay Despair, like Bay of Despair. Like it's not a place that a lot of people like, and it wasn't that great. So they spent their entire life driving from one side of Canada to another side of Canada, just spreading the gospel and stuff like that. So.
I met your mom, so it's kind of shocking because she's she's a nice lady.
Yeah.
I mean, I want everybody to really know the woman is and I'm not saying it to, just your mother.
Yeah.
I met her, I sat across the table from her.
Yeah.
We cracked jokes, she laughed at me because your cousins making fun of me because of a couple of things that, that I was going through and stuff like that. But it was funny. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I've never seen your father really crack jokes before, so it was kind of like odd. But then when I met your mom, I was like, oh, she's jive cool, like she's down the earth.
She's definitely
So it was kind of shocking the way you told me that background and how change comes about.
She kind of lived her life like really, like her parents were kind of, I wouldn't say controlling, but they were really about like, we're doing this, you can't do this, you can't do whatever. I wouldn't say she was necessarily like, sheltered, but her life was so different than a lot of the people's. And I think she was super shy. That was another big thing too. She was really shy, and I can't correlate that with with her like upbringing or anything, but she was very shy and has completely come out of that shell. And it's crazy too because she gets like really riled up about like Black Lives Matter, like that kind of stuff. She gets more angry than my dad does.
Oh, okay.
So, but yeah, no, she's cool.
Because you get to a good point. I think a lot of times when fathers are absent, the children need that stronghold to prop them up, to give them the guys where they need to go, while the mother does the nurturing. Mm-hmm. And I say this because when you describe the dad, he doesn't have, he didn't have the tools. He wasn't given the tools by his father to teach you about his family, where they come from, how they are, the things they went through.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, there's a space missing there that should have been filled. Mm-hmm. Now, so in that instance, you can see that the way how do people perceive you in general? Let's go to your schooling.
Okay.
Let's start with schooling.
So, I mean, I only went to public elementary school. After that, I was homeschooled. But I played music and like in a band and stuff, so I met a lot of people from like Louis High and stuff like that. But in elementary school, I think in like 3rd, 5th grade, so like during the end of it, someone asked me if I'd rather be black or white, and it's just funny because like I always make this joke that if I achieved something and it was worth noting, and like there was an article about me, they would say like mixed kid, or whatever, if they brought up my race. But if I shot somebody, or if I did some kind of crime, they would say black teenager or whatever and stuff like that. And it kind of came up a lot in school. Like everyone expected me to be good at basketball or just like sports in general. And I wasn't like necessarily bad at sports, but I never really enjoyed them as much as just something else. But yeah, during school, like
Stereotypes.
Yeah, lots of stereotypes. But yeah, I got asked a lot of questions like that.
Was that from? Now let me back you up. Was that from
African Americans?
mixed African American kids or white kids? Because I could see it from both.
No.
Like
yeah,
they would
I
like
agree.
sound like, yo, how come you don't play? You're black.
Yeah.
Like, or white kids like, yo, how come you don't play?
Well,
You're black.
that's
Like,
the big thing for me was the fact that like I skated. I was like a skateboard and like I was into different kind of music. I wasn't into rap music as much. Like I know all about the history of rap music and stuff, but I'm not like into it as heavily as like normally. I guess like the average African American, however you want to say that. But the big thing was like white people would assume a lot because they don't know. And a lot of my friends that I did hang out with who were white were people that didn't have any. I was always token. I was a token black guy or a token black guy, a little mixed. So all the stereotypes had to be true, and if they weren't, it was like earth shattering. Like you're not like the others and stuff like that. It would always be like mildly racist. Like it wasn't like something that was overt.
It was subtle.
It was just a lot of stereotypes that I didn't meet, and they'd be like, oh, that's crazy. But like black kids just wouldn't really talk to me. It wasn't really anything. I never had any growing up. The only other African American friends that I did have, they were also mixed. So that was really it. Sorry, I got distracted. No, so I didn't really have any African American friends growing up, and in school they just didn't talk to me because I was different in that sense. So like there's a rapper who says that I don't really like that much, but Tyler the Creator, this rapper, I don't like him. But he said he's too black for the white guys and too white for the black guys. So you kind of meet in that middle. It's exactly what I am. But I would say that white people are a lot more drawn to me than African Americans are. And I think one thing too, like at my job, when I was managing at Forever 21 for a while, and I was one of the leads or whatever, and they thought I was rich. Was the way I talked. Thought I was either rich or just a lot older, and which I would not say that you have to talk a certain way to be African American. I don't think you have to talk a certain way at all. But that was a big thing with them. Like, I mean, they're younger kids. They're my age, and they all thought that I was rich.
no, it happened with me. My daughter and I the other day we got into it.
Yeah.
What I did was I was saying that demographics has a big play on how you present yourself.
Yeah. No. Totally.
Trump grew up rich, but he talks like he's from Staten Island. It's really true. When you have certain demographical areas, you will tend to pick up their
slang and their
lingo.
yeah.
Sometimes
Their
when I would
drawl.
go to the West Indies and come back, I would sound West Indian.
Yeah.
It was just a
Oh my gosh.
blending in.
When I go back to Canada, I come back sounding completely different, and it's really frustrating for other people. But no, I completely agree, and I think though, most of my friends are white, and they don't have like the lingo is not as big of a thing. That like I had someone recently call me uneducated. They said that I sounded uneducated because of, like I said something. I don't remember what word it was, but it was just some lingo that I picked up, not even from like African American, from skateboarding. Like it was just something that they would say, and like that's one thing too. I guess my only like black friends would be from skating, because that's a whole subgenre or like subculture in and of itself. That like it doesn't matter what you are. If you have a skateboard, you're fine.
You're fine.
Yeah, you're good. So that would be the one thing, which is tight because like that's not an African American dominated sport, but they're killing it now. But anyway, yeah. So I think that like recently someone called me uneducated because of lingo, and it's like it's really frustrating because I don't know. I just feel like when someone uses lingo that is more slanted toward like the African American side, but like if a surfer talks. Like they don't call a surfer uneducated. I mean, some surfers sound really dumb, and I'm kind of generalizing, but like I think there is a weird like prejudice toward that.
There's a befitting. You can see it divide. I mean, now don't let me misconstrue anything. I think that black people have prejudice too. I have some prejudice. Yeah. I have some prejudice. Like I told my daughter, a snake can only produce a snake. If they killed everything that every place that they've gone and killed it, took them the land and demonized the people of color there and taken their land from them, they're gonna continue to do it. That's just their nature. They just produce people like that. Now some of them change, some of them become different.
Yeah.
Not all of them are the same. And I'm just saying you have to be leery of who you deal with. But my daughter has grown up in the information age where social media is a main nurturer, and I'm trying to turn that around to help to have an understanding of the way I grew up, our grandparents grew up, and their grandparents and grandparents grew up. There is a difference. There is a dynamic that's changed. But yes, the demographics change who and how you conduct yourself in a certain manner.
Yeah. I agree. And I would say, though, too, the one thing, what I feel like would be helpful in high school, I got, like, not rejected, but I was not allowed to date a lot of girls. And okay, my mom's white. I guess naturally I like white women. I don't know if that's what happens, but I still like,
I've seen that pattern happen.
Yeah. I've tried to date multiple girls, and their parents have found out. Like, I've been told that if I had kids with the daughter, they'd be mentally challenged because they'd be mixed. Yeah, which would make me mentally challenged, or I guess differently abled. I think that's how they would be preferred to be called. I've been told that I've ruined the bloodline. I've just been told that, like, I'm no good, things like that, like without knowing me at all and stuff like that. Which is frustrating because a lot of the girls like that I would try to date, what they would rebuttal with would be like, so they'd say like, you can't date him because he's black. And they would always think, well, he's not all that black, which would be like, again, at that point, me realizing, oh, you're saying that like in the sense that like I'm not bad. Yeah. And you get what I'm saying? Yeah. They'd be like, oh, well, he's not that black. And it's like, what do you mean? Like, I'm not that dangerous. I'm not like that, whatever. So that would happen. That happened a lot. I think if I remember correctly, 6 times. Mm-hmm. Where in my first girlfriend ever, her dad was an elder at a church, and he said his daughter was breaking his heart by dating a Negro boy. So like those things, and that never really bothered me that much because it wasn't a problem with me. It's something I could not change. It was a problem with themselves, and they had to get over that. But also like, you're limiting yourselves to a lot. Like if you're saying like, oh, you can't be influenced by any like black culture, like you'll gladly take hip hop, you'll gladly take like all these other things, but you won't like associate with them. Like you're gonna eventually get around to that. Also, I know that
rock and roll.
Yeah, rock and roll, blues, all that stuff. Yeah.
Grass.
But I also think that I can't blame somebody who hasn't been exposed to any of that like their entire lives. Like if I had a friend who was telling me the person's transphobic, or not transphobic. Yeah, someone's transphobic, and it's like they can't get over that thing of like, how are you a girl now, and you were a boy before? Like I don't understand. But the person who they're talking about was like, well, I understand how you can't get around that. This is a new thing for you. You haven't been exposed to this for a long time. So when people don't like African Americans, they've been told things from their parents. And the parents have said things, so it's like, I understand you have a lot of reservations because you've been taught this, and you were going like against the grain from your whole family lineage. Like, I don't feel bad. I feel bad for you, but I don't take it upon myself to be upset about it. So through high school, like that was a consistent thing of just like being reminded that I'm African American, and like that kind of sucked. Like knowing that like, oh, for some reason, my skin color limits who I can date. And I have to find a very open-minded family to like try to become a part of. And then on my end, it's like we're very open. But here's the twist to that though is like the number of times that I've gone somewhere with my mom to like some grocery store or wherever it is, and my dad's there with them. And African American women are feisty when it comes to like their men. That would be something that come up a lot, and they'd be very like upset that my mom would be with my dad. And I guess it kind of comes down to this whole thing of like, oh, we're not good enough for you and stuff like that. Which like, that's one thing where it's kind of been the opposite.
Do you think it's inherent? Like say this, Usually in the slave trade, they would separate families in order not only to punish them, but to enslave them even more mentally. See, if you have a person's mind,
Yeah,
then
you got
you have
everything
that person entirely.
Yeah.
So, in order to break the stronghold of the black family, they would separate the black family.
Yeah.
And so, by it's like a constant taking away from you.
Yeah.
And then when you see it, it's not to say that I want him, but it's like a family unit. I remember one time a white guy came up to me and said, "Man, I envy you black guys, black people." And I said, "What did you say that for? What are you talking about?" Because it was kind of strange. It just came out of nowhere. And I said, "What do you mean by that?" He says, "Now usually you like, yo, grip him up, like, yo, what you mean by that? But nah, I just wanted to find out what was ticking his mind that he would find it comfortable enough to come up to me and say that." He says, "Because I admire you because black people don't throw away their parents, whereas we white people send our parents to homes for caretaking homes for them to be taken care of. But yo, bring in your parents, yo, take them, yo. It's like one family unit."
Yeah. I would think. I mean, that's one guy saying that. I would say that's kind of a generalization, but I get what he's saying. It's funny. I'm closer to my family in Canada than I am to anyone around here. But I think a big part of that does come with different interests in general. Like again, like I don't care about sports that much. Like
or video games and then
well, I mean, I play video games and whatever, but like it's not like a thing. It's not a huge topic of conversation between people. But I would say this, like something I thought about the other day. Well, two things. One, when you're talking about the family unit and splitting them up, I think like one of the biggest forms of like suppression or oppression of like African Americans was taking away their dads, like making marijuana a Schedule I drug. That whole like just the whole war on drugs in general was just like based in racism, based in taking fathers away, and based in putting like redlining with when like African Americans came back from war, they did redlining, which was like drawing the lines of like they can live here and they can live here, putting them in smaller areas, making schools being funded by property taxes, which I think might be changed now, but like property taxes, you have overcrowded schools, you have dumbed down people with no dads, like looking up to the family or like the neighborhood guy who might sell crack, might do whatever, and again generalizing, but like what else are you gonna do? Like if you're growing up in Baltimore and you don't feel like you're smart, you don't feel like you can go to college, you don't feel like you can whatever, why would you not look up to the guy doing something illegal but making money? And I think that's a huge thing that's happened. Like over, I think it's getting better, but I still think that like it's something that not a lot of people acknowledge. And again, I don't think that like playing a victim is a good thing either. I think obviously like you can't do that because like nobody really respects that. But I do think it's good to have that understanding of like, oh yeah, this is why this has happened. And like I think when people get upset and like the big thing like African Americans are lazy, stuff like that, like that's really frustrating to me because it's like, well, it's not like or that they like more, they'll do more crime.
Because you've never known your dad to be lazy. I know your dad is lazy.
No.
So it's kind of like
I get very frustrated.
What are you talking about? Some strange stuff.
I mean, stuff's happening at work.
You get strange things from both sides.
Yeah, I don't think it's a one side thing. I think one side's a lot more intense than the other, but I think like, I think it's all over the place. And then, sorry, the other thing I was gonna say, it had to do with family units, dads. I forget what it was. Lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Yeah, what do you necessarily consider yourself?
Just mixed. Okay. Like I'm black and white, and I think
you prefer that.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair to say I'm not one or the other. I'm both. The same thing. Like I have a dual citizenship in Canada. People say like, oh, are you Canadian American? Like I'm both. Like I'm legally both of those things. There's nothing in between. It's just, I mean, there's nothing one side or the other. It's just, I'm just both those things. So, I mean, some people say, oh, you're light skinned, but it's like, I mean, yes, technically I am light skinned, but I'm mixed. I'm not of African American descent, like of both sides. I just came out light skinned. I'm both. And I think that there's nothing wrong. Nothing wrong with it, obviously not. But like, I've never had a hard time explaining that to somebody unless they think I'm Hispanic, like I've said before, or think I'm rich. So like, out of those two things, I think like, yeah, I always just say I'm mixed.
Do you feel that when you say that and you have this point of view as the mixed point of view, do you think it is because that you don't want to deny one over the other, you don't want to put one over the other?
I would say, so we can come on we can have an agreement that like, when people say you're not really black, or you don't talk black, or you're not white, or you don't whatever, that like those are unfair stereotypes. But we can use those because that's what people use a lot of times. Like people will say like, I don't talk black, I talk white, or I dress white, or I'm whatever.
I would say that.
Yeah, I dress.
I'll be one of them. I'm guilty. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that like one, those are unfair because it puts limits on what people can be.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's not fair. You put people in a box, and it doesn't feel
My
good to
daughter
anybody.
said the same thing.
Yeah, but I do think though that because people say those things, like there is some bearing to it because a lot of people understand what you mean. Like if you say that about somebody, they're like, I know what you mean, but that's not like how you say it. So to say that, like, it's not that I necessarily would choose one over the other, but I would say most people say that I'm white. Like you're a white dude. Like they.
I mean, if someone was listening to you, never saw you over the phone,
they're surprised.
I was thinking you're white. I was telling my daughter, there's a difference in California between a person who is from the Valley, which are rich people, how they talk, and the people that talk in LA. Now you can have the same demographic, white and white.
Mm-hmm.
But the Valley person will think that the white person of LA, even though they're rich living in Beverly Hills, that they're trash.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? And then the LA person will think the Valley person is weird because they constantly say like, so what do you like? So yeah, like you didn't like, so yeah. And I try to show her that even in the same instance, the same culture, they will make fun of each other just because of the demographic and the way you sound.
But I think the one thing for me is just like, for people to make fun of how I talk, or like people would say like I sound pretentious. That was like a big one. It was like, oh, you sound really pretentious. Because I would use like a word or whatever it is, and like that was always frustrating. But again, I did not spend enough time around African Americans. Like one big thing that I always thought was funny is that like, a lot of African Americans will repeat a sentence after someone else has said it, and I never like understood that thing. And I always thought it was funny that like I would say something that I did not think was funny, and they would like repeat it, like he said whatever, and like he'll like repeat that thing, and I always thought that was like so interesting. Like that's how distant I am from like being around African Americans. But when I had to be, not had to, that sounds like I don't like it, but when I was in those circumstances, like especially when I used to manage, like there would be a lot of things like, one, like why would I say things the way I would say them, or just like I don't talk, it was just always mentioned, like the way I talk was always mentioned, and yeah, I sound white. Like people on the phone would be like, oh, I didn't expect you. Same with my dad. When people talk to my dad, they're just like, oh, I didn't expect you to be African American.
I've had it,
which is fine. Like that's not a big. I don't think that's like a big deal. But I would say that like it normally has like a negative connotation to it. I wouldn't say it's always positive.
Yeah, listen, let me tell you. I used to work for a company called Prudential-Based Securities, Wall Street, and I was a cold caller. But we weren't supposed to do contracts. But my stockbroker taught us how to do the contracts because he gets the clients. So what we would do is we would get the people to spend their money, become clients, and he'd fill out the paperwork. By the time we were finished, when he got on the phone, he said, man, I couldn't tell if you were black or you were white. He was like, I'm white. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
They was like, oh, okay, I kind of figure right. But meantime, between time, there's two black kids, one from Harlem, one from Brooklyn doing it. Yeah. And the other cold callers, some of them were from like Harvard and Yale. Yeah. They had graduated, so they were trying to really get into the Wall Street scene. And my friend and I, we didn't have no degree, and we were getting what you call zero count. So we would get people who would spend millions. And they couldn't get somebody to spend $10,000 to invest. And so they were looking at us with scorn like, these hood boogers,
Yeah.
I'm just using the common word, but how they freaking get these accounts? We can't. Freaking Harvard guy.
Yeah.
That's how I pictured it.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you one question. This is my last question to you. And I know I already asked you what do you relate to. Do you believe that you are African American or just American? Or there's no even distinct title for you to where you are?
I don't know. I never even thought about that. I think it's funny because this sounds terrible, but I've only experienced bad things for being African American. I've only experienced discrimination for that part. I don't.
So you don't want no part of that?
No. It's not that. But I mean, like, I've only gotten, or I've only received bad things for being that. It's interesting because of that, I think that I do consider myself that because I've only that's what's attached to me. My skin tone is that's what's attached to me, and that's the whole thing. You're black. That's what I was saying earlier. The whole thing of how people view me.
Yeah, black people. I would say, he's a black guy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
White dude try to make fun of you or something. I'm gonna tap his top. Yeah, that's my brother right there. You ain't gonna. But
I think I would never consider myself I guess I'm more American because I've lived in the States longer than being in Canada, but I'm also legally I'm both. And the same thing with being black or white. It's I consider myself African American. I don't really consider myself white because I'm not. Because if someone looks at me, I'm not white. And I think it comes down to that. I don't think there's and that's sketchy too because you were talking about people in Jamaica, was it?
Yeah, Jamaica.
Just stuff like that where it's kind of strange that it's your heritage is this. You look like this, so what are you? And what I just said was, I'm black because when people look at me, I'm black. But all people also look at me and they think I'm Hispanic. So it's I don't really know. That's a really good question because I really don't know how to answer. But I would say yeah.
I think that becomes the problem. That's why I was doing this particular thing to say, what are the detriments for interracial, not only dating but marriage, and the effects of it all.
Yeah.
And not only that, I mean, it can go through a wide spectrum because now, you can have the gay community. I won't say homosexual community, but you can have the gay community. And now they're talking about having the discussions about pedophilia. They're teaching pedophilia in school, that it's okay. Oh, you didn't know that, right? Yeah, they're starting. And I once did a report about that. I did won a debate on that. Mm-hmm. That if the government, if you allow them to do this, what will make them stop?
Yeah.
It's just like
the line keeps getting drawn.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you make laws for the homosexual community, what's next? People want to have sex with animals, which they just gave those 3 white guys, 42 years for having sex with those pigs. That it was on the internet. I don't know if you ever saw that. Yeah, we're at the last part in which you heard Nick's testimony. And in his testimony, you heard his different experiences from his father to him. And you can see the way it affects someone. I once had a heated discussion with my daughter about the way people talk and their dynamics of their areas in which they've grown up, who they've experienced these things with, and how they relate to one another. Some people would say, hey man, he talks black. Or hey man, he's from the hood. Or hey, you know what, he sounds real white to me. He talks white, he acts white. And she said to me, what is acting white? What is talking white? And you could even see that Nick was even saying, yes, that's where my father got it from. So a lot of people say he talks white. He does sound that way because the way he was raised around all white men. They grew up. And because his father didn't teach him about who he was as a black man, as an African man with African descent, he was taught by white men. And so that's the way his father interacts. You can see the way things are and the way how it affects people and how people treat people just by the color of their skin. Just being interracial, your interracial nationality, it has its own, it's taken on its own entity within itself. You can see that Nick struggles with being black and white. You can see that he struggles with having the knowledge of who he really is. And I think this goes on with a lot of people every day, unless they accept. You know, Jane Elliott said that it's these differences that are taught with racism. These experiences are taught. Think about it. You think that one doesn't want to be accepted, but if you ask a white person, hey, would you exchange your place in the way blacks are treated today? Would you want to take their place and be treated the same way as blacks are being treated or have been treated in the past? How many whites do you think would accept that exchange? Because they understand that. They understand the experiences. They know it. They understand it, and yet nothing's done about it. And then you see blacks and whites coming together in relationships. And what does that produce? Do you instill where they came from, who they are, from both sides? Well, what side is this? Give me your feedback.